We're all set. Mr. Cancer, you're on.
Thank you, Your Honor. How can anybody be against the Holocaust Museum? The presentation that has been made here tonight was articulate, well thought out, well planned. Mr. Harris, I salute you for your courage, for your guts, for your perseverance. How can anyone be against the Holocaust Museum? It's a good question. But in this particular case, although it's close to Christmas and I fear being a Grinch, I have to say it's the wrong question. The question that comes to mind is, why Morton Grove? Now, it has been in the paper. It was sort of explained by Mr. Rigoni, but it was in the paper quoting Mayor Van Duzen of Skokie, who, by the way, is an honorary board member of the Holocaust Museum, that Skokie declined to participate in this because there are so many ethnic groups in Skokie, and if you do it for one, you got to do it for all. Now, it's possible, as the mayor of Morton Grove has alluded to, that the paper has misquoted Mayor Van Duzen. It's happened. The papers sometimes get the essence but not the exact quote. But the fact is that Morton Grove has a number of ethnic communities also. We're a very diverse community. And although the assertion has been made by the proponents that the situation in Morton Grove is different, somehow, I fail to see why setting this precedent would not activate the law of unintended consequences. As was alluded to in the presentation, Skokie has had experience with being successfully sued by nutcases. The Nazis in the 70s. What seems to be overlooked is that those fruitcakes won. And so there's a reason with its history why Skokie might just be a little gun shy to set that precedent. And they've turned these, according to Mayor Van Duzen, they've turned these requests down in the past. Now, Morton Grove, in its recent history, has experienced being sued by a 501c3. And the only reason that suit was withdrawn was that 501c3 got what they wanted. Now, last Monday night, I believe Ms. Hoffman stated that there was no legal basis that these people could prevail on a suit. And I believe she's repeated something similar to that this evening. But as was also pointed out, the fact that a suit is baseless does not prevent it from being brought forward, and therefore the village would have to defend even a baseless suit. So Mr. Thill's suggestion of a bond, or in or having the Holocaust Museum indemnify the village of Morton Grove over the period of these bonds really isn't such a far out idea. You can't stop people from suing you. Now, if the Holocaust Museum is not willing to indemnify the village, there is definitely a downside for the taxpayers of Morton Grove. Now, the bond amount in the original paperwork, I have to say I'm not as familiar with all of the paperwork as I might have been, because my FOIA request was finally delivered yesterday at about 4:45 p.m., and I've only had a little over 24 hours to digest 300 pages. But I've got a large stomach and I can digest well, and so I will do my best. The bond amount now is set at $30 million according to the paperwork I've seen. Originally it was something like $24.5 million or $26.5 million. I would have to go back into that stack of 300 pages to get the exact. It occurs to me that financial institutions get paid for what they do. Bond underwriting houses get paid for what they do. Attorneys specializing in finance law and all of the other attendant collaborators are generally very well paid. Now, perhaps this is not going to come out of the pockets of Morton Grove taxpayers, but is anyone on this board and is this mayor willing to guarantee that nobody associated with this board, with this staff, with any of the major political figures that are involved in this project will not in any way, shape, or form profit from this underwriting? If not, why not? Now, I did a little bit of research when I originally heard about the 501c3 bonding, and I contacted a state agency called the Illinois Finance Authority, who, it's my understanding, it's their job to facilitate these types of transactions. That's their whole reason for being. Very much, I guess, the successor to the agency where the gentleman that spoke earlier is coming from. And they assured me at this time that they would stand ready to facilitate this project. But as the predecessor agency, where they had to collect fees to manage their overhead, so does the Illinois Finance Authority. And the person I talked to said in the vicinity somewhere of $85,000 to $90,000. So what this comes down to is basically Morton Grove is, by underwriting these, it's a cheaper way to go. I can't argue with that from the standpoint of the Holocaust Museum. I can see the benefit for that. And they are only doing their fiduciary responsibility to keep the cost as low as possible. But for the life of me, I cannot see the benefit. Now, I can see the moral benefit, but I can't see the physical, actual, monetary benefit to Morton Grove. Now, one of our previous speakers has said, well, this will bring jobs into Morton Grove. I mean, this is going to benefit Morton Grove because it's going to bring jobs. Folks, we're talking about $30 million. If you're talking about 100 jobs, that's $330,000 per job. Tourism is going to bring tourists. I believe Commissioner Suffredin said that the people that are coming from the south are going to exit at Dempster and come through Morton Grove. I love Morton Grove, but I don't see us as a tourist attraction. I don't think that the tourists are going to come to see the closed marathon station or the closed BP or Woman's Workout World, or the Woodlands. More to the point, the more convenient exit would be at Old Orchard. So if there's going to be economic benefit, if there's going to be tax benefit, if there are going to be jobs to benefit, it is most likely that these benefits will go to Skokie, not Morton Grove. Now, I have to go back to this packet of 300 sheets. And at this point, I will be very disappointed if I don't get a groan from at least one person sitting on the dais. But after going over these 300 sheets, I come up with two words: done deal. It seems to me that there is reason to believe that at the least this project is being fast-tracked without taking the time to look at some of the facts. Now, what are some of the facts? In the packet of 300 sheets that I received, one of the sheets was a preliminary schedule of events produced by the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. And now I can tell you where I got the 26.5. That's where it is, right on the top of the sheet. It says $26,500 with an asterisk subject to change, and obviously it's already been changed to 30. Village of Morton Grove, Illinois, Cultural Facilities Revenue Bonds, Illinois Holocaust Museum, Series 2006. Preliminary schedule of events. And the first meeting we see is 11/20/2006, organizational meeting. And then 11/28, first draft of offering document and so forth. This is all laid out to where tonight's meeting is here. First sign off on offering documents and bank documents was yesterday, according to this. And the closing is scheduled for the 20th of December. That is, of course, assuming that this gets done as a deal. Now, the Skokie Talk had a piece about the dedication of the Forest Preserve for Mr. Sutker, where on Thursday, October 26th, where the mayor met with the gentleman from the Holocaust Museum, and this was discussed. But also in this packet of 300 sheets, I have a memorandum from Arnstein and Lair, LLP, dated to Howard Swibel, dated October 26th, 2006, which was the same day as the mayor's meeting. And I will only read a part of two paragraphs. In Illinois, a unit of local government with home rule powers, like the village of Morton Grove, may issue tax-exempt revenue bonds for the benefit of nonprofit organizations. It goes further from there. Specifically talking about the village of Morton Grove. Second paragraph. In a tax-exempt conduit financing, the village would issue revenue bonds and loan the proceeds to the museum. Okay? My question is, does Mr. Connolly from Arnstein and Lair have precognition? Does he work that quickly? Now, it doesn't say in the Skokie Talk what time of day that Mr. Swibel met Mayor Creer. But this is a 3+ page memorandum that is fairly complete, and it was produced on the same day of the meeting. Does that mean that perhaps this is a done deal? or at least that the time frame here is not complete. Now, it's been said here by one of the folks that's involved with the bonds, and I will confess that most of the time when we start talking about things financial, my eyes glaze over. I would rather have my gums scraped than read a spreadsheet. But the comment was made that the bonds, I'm trying to find the exact term. It has to do with the bonds, the municipality having issued bonds up to a certain level. And they can't go past that, and if they do, it affects their ability to issue bonds. Well, we've been told that the village of Morton Grove hasn't issued any of these bonds this year, and that's the reason that there's room under this cap to issue these bonds. But we have issued bonds. They were for an ambulance. And there was an email conversation. It's a bank qualified loan. That's the term that was used. That was the loan that was made, and the question was asked from our financial director, Daniela Partapillo. Howard, is attached is the loan we spoke about, and I believe it is a bank qualified loan. Due to the fact the village was not represented by Chapman on this particular issue, they wouldn't be unaware of it. Please review the documents. And we've had a visit with Frank Paul from Key Bank, and it goes on. The response was, yes, you are correct, but I would be willing to pay the cost of the additional interest if the $200,000 note were converted to a non-bank qualified. Well, I think that's nice, but the fact is we've been told that there were no bank qualified debt instruments issued. Which is it? Good question, I think. The other thing is that we do have the memorandum from Chapman and Cutler that goes through everything that we've been told tonight as far as information on how the bonds should be issued, and the village would not be responsible financially. And it's dated October 27th, the day after the mayor met with Mr. Swibel. I have to say Chapman and Cutler is either faster than a speeding bullet, or perhaps there may have been some previous knowledge. And I've got a problem with that. I truly have. The other thing that, and this will be my last point, for two reasons. First of all, I get to be a bag of wind too often, and I go on too long. And secondly, I'm starting to get dry and won't be able to speak much longer anyway, which to some people may be a good thing. But this is setting a precedent. There's no argument that it's setting a precedent. We're doing something for the first time, and we are doing it, or this board will be doing it, in the name of the people of Morton Grove, all 22,000 plus of us. And as Mr. Thill said, we haven't had much press coverage on this. I don't think a lot of people know what's going on here tonight, because I believe if they did, we would not be able to find a seat. So I would strongly suggest this. The Holocaust Museum is a wonderful project. I agree it should be built. If, in fact, Morton Grove is going to do this, perhaps we should ask the 22,000 plus people in whose name you're doing it. This board has the power to put this question on a referendum in the April election. And I would strongly urge the trustees to give some serious thought to that. If it is a good thing, the people of Morton Grove, or the majority, 50% plus one, will say, yes, this is a good thing, and we want to do it. At least By doing so, you will give the people a chance to voice their thoughts by having a referendum. It pains me to stand up here and speak against this because I strongly believe in the project. But I also know that the science fiction novelist Robert Heinlein coined a phrase that's become an acronym. TANSTAAFL. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Somewhere, somehow, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. We are told that you should never rush into something, never be pressured into something. You've even got 3 days to back out on a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman in the state of Illinois. My third grade teacher had a favorite saying. MYOB. Stands for mind your own business. This museum, as wonderful as it is Skokie's business. I believe that our board should take that under consideration, and we should mind our own. Thank you.
You, Pat. Anybody else? Yeah, Mr. Conrad.
I'm not going to be nearly as long. But the fact is, we heard tonight, it doesn't cost the village a penny. It's already cost the village a penny. Having this meeting has a cost to it. The finance director, the village manager, and the village attorney are very high-paid employees who have already spent a lot of time on it. And as harping on Pat's last comments, there's not only a financial cost to it, but there's an opportunity cost. All the time that these high-paid village employees have been spending working on this issue could have been spent working on Morton Grove business. For instance, Dan Stackman reported to our Environment Commission that our tree ordinance has been under review by village commissioners or staff review, and it hasn't made it to, through the proper channels yet. That's one example of one piece of village business that's not getting worked on while we're working on other projects. And, that's basically an opportunity cost, not a financial cost, but it's an opportunity cost. We have an outdated village code in this town that we've been told by not this administration, but a previous board, that we're going to update that thing. These type of things aren't getting done. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anybody else? Wilma. Or, sir, go ahead.
My name is Joe Borst. I'm a resident of Morton Grove, and I'm opposed to the Holocaust Museum. I think it's a great idea, and it should be built, but it's Skokie's problem. It is not Morton Grove's problem. And as I read into this, I find out that they already have $15 million through fundraisers from private firms. Now, if this is true, and we're going to give them $30 million, is this going to cost $45 million? And we have no control over that $30 million, and I also read into it that the $30 million that Morton Grove will give them is going to be used to build a condominium next to the museum. Now, whether I'm right or wrong on that, I don't know, but I read that in the paper. Now, since we don't have any control over this money, I still think it's Skokie's problem, not Morton Grove's problem, and I'm opposed to it. But I do think that the museum is needed, and I do also think that on the economy part of it, the people that come to that museum will do their shopping at Old Orchard. Why don't they continue to work on their donations and get more money from these businesses and private donors, and proceed that way. There was one other thing I wanted to, oh yeah, and I agree with Pat. I really think that it should not be put up to the trustees. I think it should be put up to the people of Morton Grove, and that it should be put on a referendum in April. Let them decide. And then I think we'll have a true vote on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wilma?
I've written my notes out in advance because I like to get through them as succinctly as possible. I'm asking permission to voice my objection to Morton Grove's involvement in the financing of outside charities, most specifically the current one under discussion. Again, I'm not against the Holocaust Museum. I'm against Morton Grove's involvement in this. Frankly, I'm aghast. I would like to think that the first duty of elected officials would be to determine what their duty is in their office. Secondly, are they qualified for the office? And thirdly, how are these duties to be performed? Fourthly, focus on that office with all consideration to the welfare of the citizens of Morton Grove. After everything like this has been done for Morton Grove, should they consider outside involvements? It would seem that Morton Grove has many of their own problems and many things that the board should be focusing on rather than meetings like this, spending their time thinking about it. They should be brainstorming on other problems that exist. And certainly anybody who lives here can think of problems. There's lots of work that Morton Grove should be doing with TIF districts. What about the excavations around town? There's a lot of excavations, but not much building. We used to have free garbage. And we keep hearing about Morton Grove's acquisition of land, and not much has been done with that. I think there are many, many problems in Morton Grove that this board should be focusing on, and not involvements with the other towns that turned down. It's not possible to save the world. You have to start with your own problems, and the problems here would seem to be that Morton Grove has enough of them without spending time and energy on these kind of meetings, and whatever time all of you have put in, whatever time these people have put in, and who's paying for all these. Sure, there's somebody's going to send out an estimate, but they should be focusing their thoughts on Morton Grove's problems and not this kind of thing. Skokie said no to this problem. Why are we chumps to take off the problems, take on the projects that they don't want? And we certainly do not have in this town a great procedure for working with 503 charities, and the other people in town who certainly have a lot of problems. Just as a kind of a footnote, and this is a thought of mine and not necessarily connected with this or any other project, but our mayor had said he was doing this because these were his friends. And I have a problem with any public official that starts saying he's going to do something for his friends, because usually there's something connected that's not quite right.
I know, where did I say that, Wilma? I'm doing this for my friends. I never said that.
At the last meeting I think we were not at the last meeting, but we saw the meeting on television, and you had said that you were at a meeting with your friends, and that
I was at a meeting.
You were doing it for your friends.
I never said I was doing it for my friends.
Well, then it's a misunderstanding.
Thank you.
But I have a problem with public officials that say they're helping their friends, because usually there's
Yeah, I
something
got it.
not quite correct in the
Well,
background.
I can tell you, I got in public service to help people, friends, foes alike. I went,
Well,
I-
I would sincerely like all of you to think about what's the first thing you should be thinking about, and the first thing to think about is the greater good for Morton Grove, not getting involved in other projects.
thank you, Wilma. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Lee. First time I stepped foot in Morton Grove was August 3rd, 1979. I am myself a product of a survivor of the Cambodian genocide. I lived in Morton Grove for about 2 years before I moved to Chicago, and ever since, well, we moved out because of my parents. But ever since then, I've always wanted to move back to Morton Grove. I speak to you now, having been a resident of Morton Grove for the past 8 months again. And I can say that the Holocaust Foundation is a great thing. And I think having Morton Grove attached to it, it's just a really good thing. And I'm just saying this because I'm a resident of Morton Grove. I just want to voice my opinion. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir. Come.
For us as survivors, this becomes a personal issue. And I am overwhelmed at the pain that I've heard from some of the opponents that feel that this is going to be your problem. It's not your problem. It's an opportunity to do well. It's an opportunity to deal with your children and your grandchildren, whom we are striving to teach about genocide, about pain. And by you being involved with it, that's a noble cause. And it's not a money cause. I think it's been spelled out to you numerous times. You have no legal monetary obligation to that. We are doing this because we're building an organization that will teach, not Skokie, not Morton Grove, but it's going to be a national organization. We travel through 4 or 5 different states to speak to young people. And I wish you could accompany us and to see how we touch young people. How sometimes young people change. They make a difference. They send thousands of letters. I think it's a noble cause for you to be involved with, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none. Oh. No, you can't come up. This is my wife. See, I'm not the mayor at home or here when she's around.
I just wanted to say something before this organization left. I've been in Morton Grove for 47 years, and I was appalled by some of the comments that were made here. If we all minded our own business, and we all just worried about ourselves, where would any of us be? I teach in an inner city school, and it's filled with violence, and it's filled with children who are raised by violent families, violent parents, in violent neighborhoods. And I watch my kids react to the very smallest thing that doesn't go their way, and the first thing they do is they lash out. And the thing that I find so amazing about this whole thing is I remember watching that Nazi march in Skokie. And I thought, how do people sit there and watch this without lashing out? And the fact that you formed an organization and protested in that manner and went out to educate people, that to me is just amazing. And that's what our children need to learn. It is scary to watch the younger generation out there and how they deal with anger and how they deal with frustration, and to think that these are the kids who are looking to us to teach them. And if I minded my own business, I wouldn't be teaching in an inner city school. I'd be teaching out here or somewhere else. And as much as I can't stand that commute, and as frustrated as I get because I'm not making very much money there, I go home, and in the long run, I know that I've made a difference in somebody's life. And so I think it is our turn to reach out and to get involved and to mind somebody else's business. Because if we don't do it, we're just going to assume someone else is going to do it. And that's pretty scary. So I think that we need to take this opportunity to fund this. It's our way of promoting or supporting somebody who turned something horrible into an act of peace and something very positive that our kids can look to and learn from. Thanks.
Anybody want to follow that? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion to close the public hearing by trustee Bruner, seconded by trustee Minks. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now the vote, or the, like a motion, this is the second reading of ordinance 0646. I'd like a motion to accept ordinance 0646.
I'll move to approve
Second.
ordinance 0646.
Motion made by trustee Bruner, seconded by trustee Meeks. Any discussion by trustees?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
It's the,
Excuse me, can I interrupt? Could you please open up the special meeting? You closed the public hearing. You need to open up the special.
I opened at the beginning, at 6
Oh,
o'clock.
did you?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
At the last board meeting, I requested, because I didn't remember verbatim what it said anymore, about the resolution about first read.
Yes, Corporation Counsel, you want to?
Trustee Stackman, our resolution, which implements our policy for a first read, states that an ordinance is presented at a board meeting for a first read and no action is taken on it. It's automatically postponed to the next regular meeting. It also states that any action taken even against that policy would not invalidate the action of a board. At last Monday's meeting, it was announced, or the ordinance was presented for a first read, and it was announced that it would be considered for a second read at this meeting.
It would mean that this is not a regularly scheduled meeting, then are we not in compliance with that?
Well, I did check with special counsel on this issue, and both the letter and the spirit of that resolution is being followed.
So,
We have a first and second
So
read.
that's yes.
well, again, I know I instituted this ordinance, and for people in the audience who don't know what we're talking about up here, the Village of Morton Grove has a policy that any ordinance or change to the budget would have a first and second read. We'd introduce it one time and leave it sit on the floor for 2 weeks until the next regular board meeting.
Not 2 weeks, that's not what it says.
Well, until the next regular board meeting, which is approximately every 2 weeks, you know. And this being a meeting that's, 3 days after the last one, does that...
Well, I think you got the legal opinion of Corporation Counsel. You can disagree with it, or
Now, if there is a disagreement, would that jeopardize the issuance of these bonds?
as she also read the ordinance, no, that does not.
All right.
Janet, did you want to add?
Only that I agree with Corporation Counsel on this. And the key is that the special meeting was properly noticed, and the clerk was very careful in making sure that the notices went to any requesting media, was
Okay.
sent to all of the trustees and was also
Right.
posted.
Okay. Next, if this board does not issue these bonds, this museum is still going to be built. It just may take a little longer time than they want. Is that not correct?
I certainly believe that's true. They would have to go to a different issuer for bonds.
Right. So the museum will be built if the board votes no. That's generally what can happen here. Okay. The other thing I have a concern with, and Mr. Schweibel alluded to it, that if this was first brought to Morton Grove October 26th, we have a memorandum from Chaplin and Cutler dated the 27th, and another one from Arnstein and Lear dated the 26th.
I'm glad you gave me the opportunity
So am I.
because it was very dramatic when your spouse closed. And I thought to myself, well, is it even worth talking about what might appear to be trivial, but it's not trivial if it's on your mind. Let me explain to you about the miracles of word processing. The memoranda, both the Chapman and Cutler and the Arnstein and Lear memoranda, were both authored months earlier and tendered to the village of Skokie. And I will show you,
Okay.
I will give to you the original dated versions. And I must tell you, I am a passionate person. And when I met Mayor Creer, Commissioner Suffren will tell you that it was called for about 11 or 11:30 in the morning. 10 o'clock. Oh, I was late. Okay, it was 10 o'clock. was the Sutker naming event, which was in the Skokie courthouse. I rushed back downtown, and I said, let's update the memo previously given to Skokie. And I called Matt Lewin at Chapman and Cutler and asked him to do the same, which explains why a memo that looks like it should take several days to prepare could be prepared instantly. That's because all they had to do was do a global search, and where it said Village of Skokie, change it to Village of Morton Grove. That's what happened. No conspiracy, no trickery, and I'm glad you asked the question as opposed to suggesting with innuendo that there's some lack of integrity.
Well, you can
here.
see the, you know.
I could understand the question, but it's a question. Let's not answer the
Right.
question until we know the answer.
I'm-
It's because of the word processing.
Right.
The memos were done much, much earlier. All we did was change the name of the village.
I know. Well,
Does that make sense?
No, I can understand that. I've been involved with Chaplin and Cutler for over 20 years, and I know how fast they can. It's a pretty generic form for issuing bonds and whatnot that they have.
What I'm saying, but this
Right.
memo about this subject was specifically done for Skokie. All we did was change the name, and I can give you the original versions with the original dates on them. You'll see nothing's changed basically.
Yeah. I understand, and I thank you for answering that question. I mean, as Joe Wade can tell you, he and I have been on the phone 2-3 times a day for the last week and a half. He says, you're really wearing me thin here. Every 15 minutes or 20 minutes calling back and forth. I personally really dug into this long and hard. We've talked to people from Deerfield, from Skokie, from Niles, and searched the internet and been on your website and the state's websites and everything else on this. And again, I think the project's well worthwhile, but I do have concerns, and in the last 2 weeks, I can't tell you how many residents call me with concerns, and I think it's a point of confusion for the residents to understand what's really happening. I can understand by reading all this and talking to the lawyers and Terry and the finance people, you're going to pay the bill. I believe you're going to pay the bill. I have every faith you're going to raise the obligation and pay the bill, But the concern still comes in with people in Morton Grove, and that's something I can't change.
Mr. Trustee, let me address just very quickly, very briefly. The museum, I believe, will be built, but it would be a severe hardship for us if we do not get your support tonight, because I would have to start from scratch. The money that we have from the state of Illinois was given to us with the stipulation that it must be spent on construction. We signed a construction contract with Bully and Andrews. The construction is underway now. The money from the state is being spent down. It will be gone within about 45 days.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do not get your support tonight, and we have to go, for example, Illinois Finance Authority, we're talking about 3 to 4 months, I'm going to have an interruption. I'm going to have potential cost overruns. So it would be a real burden on us were you not to support it.
And I can appreciate that, but again, this has come to us. I was first notified of this issue on the 17th. It really wasn't made public probably till a week or so after that. And, we're racing through this pretty quick to be under the wire. And if the residents have that much of a concern on it, of point of confusion or newspaper press or explanation or a special meeting. Monday night we had a meeting here talking about bike paths that aren't going to happen for the next maybe 6 months to a year, You know, we're putting it on the table. We had residents come in, you know. We don't have that opportunity now. But there is a cloud of concern through many residents, you know, why we're doing this, how we're doing this. And, you know, I've told everybody that it is true. They're going to pay the bill. I can see that. And I concur with you. You're going to pay the bill.
You know, it's not to me to judge, but
Right.
it's impressive that you have done so much homework and you have learned it. And that's why your citizens are counting on you to do the homework and to understand these things. If you can explain it to people, then everybody wins.
Well, I can do a lot of things, but explain finance to people in 20-some years is a very hard thing. You know, it's easier to take an insurance seminar.
You know, Trustee Stackman, I think that begs and kind of answers the question that someone brought up about a referendum. We were elected to make decisions, and part of it is, I said, and Dan, as you said, Trustee Stackman, you know, you've gone through this, and there's 300 pages, as has been pointed out. That's what we're up here to make these decisions. I agree. I got a lot of calls from people too who don't understand. Will a referendum and time have people understand? I'm not convinced that it is. That's why you elect people to do that. And it's our job to make that decision. And you try to explain it during that time. And then after you make the decision, you still work on explaining it. And I still today, when people call me, once we get past the money issue, it's a lot easier. But and I totally get that. The people don't think, my first opinion was, there's no way this is going to cost us. But as you rightly have said, Trustee Stackman, you get that. And to me, that's the big question. Right. But
and if you remember the first conversation we had on the 17th, you know, as soon as you informed me of this, what was my comment? My comment was, are we setting precedent here, you know, down the road?
Yeah.
And that, you know, it still is a very big concern for me.
Sure. And as I said, I don't know if I had said to you at that time, Trustee Stackman, I know you're always, you're very proud of your record at the Park District, and I think it's one you should be proud of. And you're always saying different things about that, and you're talking about the potential lawsuits. As I think Janet has aptly said, you can't stop frivolous lawsuits, but do they have legal basis? That's the story. And I think as you as a Park District Commissioner for all those years would never have built a playground because lawsuits happen all the time. What you do, you make sure as a board member that they're safe, because now if they're not safe, they have a legal standing, they have a legal ground. But I think the logic to carry to the point that I think that some people have made about lawsuits is to protect against frivolous lawsuits, there is no protection. You do your due diligence, and we've done that in what I believe, and have shown that I guess the window of a lawsuit over this isn't the legal standing to do that is going to be pretty tough to meet. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Well, and it's also, you know, but when I was a parker, that was my job to build playgrounds and to build them that were safe. So, and I don't know in my heart right now if it is my job or our job to do this. You know, I mean, it's a question. I really, and I've done my homework on it. Tremendous amount of homework. You know, the possibility of being sued is there, but it's also saying no to someone else. I mean, I talked to officials in Skokie, and this is the message they told me, and that's what they said their concern was. And you even confirmed that on our first conversation. That's one of the reasons they turned it down, you know. And I've talked to several trustees in different communities that never even heard of this, you know, and they kind of had the same concern. Where does it stop?
Right.
You know.
And as I said before too, to take that logic to its nth degree, if somebody came to us, a 501(c) cancer research center, and said, we want to build a cancer research center in Skokie or in Evanston, and we qualify for this 501(c), and I tell you what too, we're going to guarantee that we're going to cure cancer in 5 years. Nobody would ask the question, well, what is that precedent setting? Are we going to have somebody else? Because, you know why? Because it's a worthwhile project. And that's what our job is also to decide to do, is look at each project on its merits. And I think everybody has said here, this project has merits. So
unquestionably, the project has tremendous merit, you know, tremendous merit, you know.
Is there any other discussion?
Can't argue that.
I'm sorry. Any other trustees' discussions?
I have a question, if I can, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Hoffman. Somebody brought up about the $200,000 loan, and I think that loan's with Cambridge Bank.
Yes, it is.
How is that affected, or how is this bond affected with that?
let me take 2 steps back and just make sure that everybody's on an even playing field with respect to what bank qualified bonds are. A municipality, a village can issue up in any calendar or in any year up to $10 million of bonds to benefit the village, and those bonds can be designated as what are considered to be bank qualified bonds. And what that means is that then a bank can buy that bond and have that interest be tax exempt interest to them. Typically, because banks hold people's deposits, there's a provision of the federal tax law which does not allow them to hold tax exempt debt and have that debt be truly tax exempt to them. There's some offsetting deductions that they would otherwise have to take. But with respect to up to $10 million of bonds of any municipality, they can be designated by the municipality as bank qualified bonds. A municipality can issue bank qualified bonds for their own purposes or to benefit a 501c3. They cannot issue bank qualified debt for an industrial development bond or for any other kind of conduit issue, but for a 501c3 they can. The village did issue $200,000 of a bank loan, I believe.
For an ambulance, yeah.
For an ambulance, and designated that as bank qualified debt. When that debt was issued, there was no expectation that you were going to be asked to issue these bonds. Chapman and Cutler, who is your bond counsel on this, looked at this and is giving an opinion, a separate opinion, that the bank qualified status of your Cambridge loan is not disturbed by the issuance of these bonds, which is an appropriate opinion for the bond counsel to give. In addition to that, the museum has agreed to indemnify the village and Cambridge Bank for any costs if that opinion turns out to be incorrect. So and the documentation for the Cambridge loan also requires Cambridge Bank to consent to the issuance of bonds by you because it could have some impact on them. They are aware of this issuance and have agreed, although they haven't actually signed the consent yet, have agreed to consent to the issuance of these bonds and are aware of the opinion which is being given and also the indemnification.
Thank you.
Any other questions, trustees?
I'd like to clarify, a few more things. I'd like to clarify the recovery of the cost of the administration time, if in fact we will. That's not stipulated in this ordinance, or I don't think there's been any formal agreement.
I think Howard can answer that. But I just want to state, too, for the record, and if that's something, trustee, that you think is necessary to put in there, that's fine. But I want everybody to understand that the 3 people that spent the most time, and myself, on this are, and I, somebody said highly paid.
Well, I know that's not true.
That's not true. They're paid well, but they're also, like I said, when I brought this up to them, they didn't say, "Oh, Mayor, I don't know. We're working on this budget, and I can't do this, and I'm not going to be here." They were here, like you said, at night and on the phone on the weekend with me, with Daniela, and none of these people get paid overtime. They're salaried employees, so there was no out-of-pocket cost to the village. The time really was on them. And so, again, to say that the village lost money, no. You can argue with lost time. I also don't think that, has it been said, that the village, because of this, was deterred from working on any other project at all. These people that I just mentioned, who I just applaud and in awe, both Daniela, Joe Wade, and Terry Liston.
Well, I think we go further than that and applaud this whole entourage that came here and the time they're spending in making this presentation. I think they've done a fabulous job.
Right, but I want to say that they've done this. Our staff has done this, and like I said, without getting paid anything extra and not asking for anything extra. So, but
Well,
Howard, you want to
I
ask
would
that?
rather have it discussed before the ordinance passed or failed than after the fact.
I agree with you.
And that's, and the other issue was you alluded at the meeting before last that there may be some special rate or something for Morton Grove Citizens Agreement, if that could be worked out, or was that worked out, or because I don't see that in here either. If it isn't, it isn't, but, you know.
Well, it's one that we talked about at the Morton Grove schools, and maybe Howard can talk about both of those.
I did mention when I first met with your village administrator, Mr. Wade, and the rest of your staff, that we very much want to make you comfortable that there is a benefit for Morton Grove. And we mentioned that there are, you have schools whose students will be visiting, and that we would be open to discussing it. It probably is not the best process to attempt to nail down specifics, only because of just the process of having so many people involved. We gave you our word at that time, and we reaffirm our willingness to sit down and talk to you. One of the things that the Washington Museum does, for example, is train police and fire personnel, as well as West Point cadets, FBI graduates. We talked about a variety of different ways in which we could perhaps offer some special services to Morton Grove, and we would be glad. As you point out, because of the rush of time, we did not spend time talking about how to specifically implement that. We're not going to be open until the last part of '08. So we're going to have plenty of time to work out the specifics, and you have our word on that. It could be a discount for school students. It could be a discount for citizens. We didn't talk about duration. We didn't talk about amounts. We would like to show good faith because we're asking you to show good faith. And so that's about...
Well, I hope you can see my concern about talking about it before and after.
Yes.
And I think he's given your answer, and that's good enough, I think, for me to say that to put in an ordinance and to muddy this up, it starts getting, I don't know. I think we're going to have a good working relationship. They're honorable people, and why wouldn't they want to help us when we've been helping them?
Right. Now, we even talked about featuring things on our website to specifically direct people in terms of Morton Grove restaurants or other facilities. So we'd like to work with you, and we'll have time to do that. Let me address the question of cost. The bond council can probably correct me, but I believe that many municipalities do not assess a cost for this kind of a procedure, other than the reimbursement of out-of-pocket costs. What Mr. Conley mentioned is an agency like the Illinois Educational Finance Authority, and as you said, or whoever talked about the Illinois Finance Authority, they're dedicated. Their staff do nothing but process these transactions, and they try to make it revenue neutral for the state of Illinois. Instead of having the General Assembly appropriate, they try to recover from the users to defray the cost of operation. That doesn't apply to a municipality. You don't have any people whose job it is 100% of the time to process these requests. You've never even had one before. So that was one of the reasons we were attracted to come here, is to try to save money. Absolutely.
And so am I.
Right, right. So, yes, it was a quick timetable. We did not discuss it, and I must tell you that one of the things that we were required to do, and Sabina's here, and the underwriters, we were required to give a strict accounting of the costs of the issuance of the bonds, meaning we have to pay the rating agency, we have to pay bond counsel, we're going to reimburse you for your counsel, we have to pay an underwriter's fee, we have to pay a bank issuance fee. We did not include anything in the budget for reimbursement of administrative costs to the Village of Morton Grove. The subject had not been raised. We did not expect or anticipate it. And I don't believe that that's a routine thing for municipalities. Is that right? Or?
If I could just make for ongoing administrative expense, we're asking that Wholesaler Bank be appointed as trustee, and the trustee will act on behalf of the village for ongoing collection of the interest and ongoing administrative fees. So
At our expense.
At your expense.
But in terms of, he's talking about within the past 2 or 3 weeks, the time spent, I don't believe that that's common practice for the municipalities to recover it.
Okay, well, if I don't ask, I can't find out.
Right.
Right.
It's a
Okay.
good thing.
Do any other trustees have any other questions? Before we take the roll call vote, I just wanted to answer one thing here, well, more than one. In letters to the editor from today's paper, a resident wrote that the acronym MYOB, Mind Your Own Business, is the path and that this administration and I should adhere to with regard to the Holocaust Museum. This reminded me of the words of the great Protestant theologian Martin Niemöller, who described so powerfully the following: when the Nazis went after the Jews, I was not a Jew, so I did not react. When they persecuted the Catholics, I was not a Catholic, so I did not move. When they went after the workers, I was not a worker, so I did not stand up. When they went after the Protestant clergy, I moved, I reacted, I stood up. But by the end, it was too late. By that time, there was no one to speak to or speak up for me. You see, I believe that the opposite of love is not hate,